What is the meaning of life, huh? Can that question be answered? Whether you say yes or no, you're right and you're wrong, according to someone else, maybe even yourself. Because what is philosophy? Philosophy is a good word invented to sum up the human experience of what do you make of life? Not just what do you make of life, what do you perceive it to be, but what do you make out of your life? Because you're going to make out of your life according to what you perceive it to be. You guys often hear me talk about root philosophy of life. It's probably the most profound, significant thing people overlook and should do something about. Take sovereignty. That requires an awareness. It requires a light in the dark to see things that are generally not seen. Running forward through a lot of worldly conditions and stresses and distractions, but there have always been people asking, what is the meaning of life? Because that's a big question, right? Maybe it's the big question. If you locked me in some kind of deprivation tank or cell and left me there with no hope of escaping, there were no more humans, or animals, or plants, or any organic life to communicate or interact with, I would still be able to go to the same source I do when I'm troubled, when I have difficulty falling asleep due to fears, concerns, stresses, or even unknown causes of feelings of dis-ease. And I don't mean disease, just dis-ease. Which, if left undealt with and unhealed long enough, could become disease. But anyway, that same source would be there with me. And when I really reached out for comfort beyond my own understanding, it would be given to me, as it always is. Now you could say, well, you did that to yourself then. But which self are we talking about? Because in my mind, in the individual me, that self you're referring to, that you think of yourself as, is an identity, whatever version of it I have. In the example I'm using, it was driving me, or it was the cause of the discomfort, the uneasy feeling, some of it understood, some of it not. So where does the relief come from? Some would say, oh, it's a mind trick. You know, you believe you're praying to God and you believe you're going to get help, so you do. Okay. So you're crediting me with having the power to manifest my own God that can do things to help me beyond my own understanding. Philosophically flattering, perhaps, but not very satisfying because it doesn't really answer the question in a way that feels right or true. I would agree that that very same source is me and is you, whether you know it or not. And is this tree? And is this ether I can't physically see, that I perceive all around and within me? And is everything with a form, everything without a form, and everything else that we haven't thought of names or labels for, we aren't even aware of with our human conjunction of particles we call a mind? Some of those particles energetic, some of those particles physical, slower, denser, the human brain. When most people say God, they're referring to something they've been told about, with conditions and stories that are largely contradictory and somewhat scattered, convoluted, and many are quite troubling and damaging, and others are quite positive. And there's a mix, and it's a mess. And very few people have had the courage or clarity to separate themselves from the authority so-called institutions of this world and question it, and look for an authentic relationship with what is, rather than some filtered idea of something that came through many other people in a long cascade of a game of telephone, with natural mistakes mixed with purposeful deceptions. So what do you do with that? Back to what is philosophy, what you make of life. Now, I'm a person who has had many out-of-body experiences in this life, where yeah, that's a good enough word for it. I had an NDE when I was 2 years old. I've had many astral projections. I've had a lot of lucid dreams, some of which turned into astral projections by intention. Um, I've had a few weird experiences where something sort of shocked me out of body consciousness into a separated consciousness. I don't even know what to label it, but these things can happen to people. Um, so for a person like me, of course, there's no doubt, um, there's no gray area or unseen shadow over the fact that we are a spiritual consciousness, an energy field consciousness, and the real you is actually formless. When people have what they call NDEs, those are largely shaped by what they've been conditioned to believe, see, and expect. Perhaps a law of expectations, as some of you call it. However, given more time in the non-physical, and I've spent enough time now, of course there isn't time there, so how much time have I really spent? Another good philosophical question. When you've had many astral projections, for example, how much time have you actually spent in non-physical reality? During an incarnation where by earth clock, my body still exists in this world, running on linear time, and yet another part of me was somewhere else where there is none. Still connected to this here, by the way, but able to travel and traverse other dimensions and places, and even view things remotely that are part of this physical universe, as well as view things remotely that are layered upon it, that are in what we would refer to as non-physical dimensions. I say all this to point out the fact that when I ask myself what to make of life, based on my unique personal experience of it and expression of it, I choose. I'm not forced, I'm not obligated, but I feel very, maybe inspired, or even something else. I don't know if there's words for it. Because of what I've experienced, there's almost a vacuum. There's almost an empty space in this world that I sense to fill by expressing that experience. It's not that it hasn't been expressed. It's just that I sense that those experiences being shared can allow the same living spirit that helps me to perceive or experience these things enter the spaces where this message is welcome and illuminate those spaces from the inside. Some of those spaces are within some of you. And what are you? What are we? Is the great we just a great I? What does it mean to be part of the infinite one, but not the totality of it? What is the meaning of life? Should I just summarize it quickly, based on a vast amount of experience, just give you a one-liner of what's been shared with me with higher consciousness? And I have interacted with many entities, beings, whatever word you would prefer. Please insert it here so you're not distracted by dogma. I've interacted with many higher consciousnesses and also many lower have interacted with me. vast differences in the energy and meaning of, or the directional pull of those experiences. But try to imagine, with your limited human capacity, and I don't care if your IQ is 5,000, it's finite, therefore it's infinitely smaller than the consciousness of that which we're all stemming from. But do your best to use the divine capacity called imagination to picture or feel, or whatever it is for you, what it would be to be timeless, infinite consciousness, formless, capable of all form, infinitely creative and expressive, infinitely powerful, completely unlimited, because you are what is. You are the infinite what is. Now, I'm not talking about right now you and I being part of that, although it's very peaceful and healing experience to feel it and sit with that and just be in it. But right now I'm talking about the Godhead or central nucleus or ultimate great spirit or whatever terminology, the source, the ultimate source, whatever works for you there. And this is really unimaginable, but it's a good practice because it stretches and expands your consciousness. And again, imagination is divine. Without it, humans will go extinct. And that's not going to happen. There could be great resets yet again, but humanity won't go extinct completely until all is fulfilled that this is ever meant to be. I digress a bit. Try to imagine being infinite and all, being all that is. And within you, you have every wonder, infinite wonder. Infinite wonders is what you are. You are infinite wonders. Now, you exist in timelessness, yet, even in timelessness, to try to bend it into a script that the human linear brain can maybe understand a bit, existing in timelessness for long enough, which would be simultaneously instantaneous and take eternity to realize, what would you do? What would you do with that? If you're infinitely creative and have no limits from yourself, you would spring forth or develop or express or extend or accentuate or spill or splatter or generate or, human words. Countless, infinite expressions of your own creativity. Living, organic, true, spiritually, etherically alive consciousness. All throughout an infinite multiverse with infinite layers of creativity. Why would you do this? When you're all that is, even if you are all that is and you're everything, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Why would you sit there in your perfection alone and just be all that is? What would be the point of that? To meditate and just kind of go to sleep for infinity? If you have infinite creative power and expression and freedom, why not give birth to free will consciousness from yourself in countless varieties of forms that interact with each other at different levels of consciousness, some more or less aware of what they really are, and in a lower realm like, say, this physical earth experience, many, probably most of which, aren't even necessarily aware of you. They may ponder it, and they may be heading towards it, and they may speculate about it, and some may actually be up in consciousness enough to be experiencing it and interacting with you. But why would you spring forth from yourself many things that are too low in consciousness to even perceive you and give them free will? Now, if you strip away all the assumptions of things you've been told about what life is, and, oh, you only live once and then you're gone, or you only live once and then you're tortured forever because you didn't say the right video game save code magic words, or Or you just go to heaven forever and, sit on clouds and play happy music. Of course, this is all nonsense, because what would be the point of any of that? But if you're spawned forth from the infinite and given free will consciousness, which you will always have, and by your choices, decisions, actions and non-actions, what you're doing and being, you're always setting a trajectory that's always changing that. It may seem too slow in people that are very calcified, who seem to never change, which means they're essentially wasting the rest of this incarnation. But in the scheme of eternity, how big of a deal is that, really? Do you need to get frustrated by those who aren't seeking anything? Or happy to be calcified and stuck the way they are until it just blocks an artery and they leave? I mean, what's to be frustrated about? There are so many philosophical branches from the great river of philosophy to explore the tide pools thereof, but to stick a little more to the central theme, what is the point of life? What is the meaning of life? Or what is the value of life? Or what is life? Life is the one. Life is the great one, the infinite, wondrous one. So we're doing our best to put ourselves in those shoes that we could never fit, right? But we can be in, and we are in, whether we know it or not. You're infinite. You're the great wonder, and now you've spawned forth from yourself infinite expressions and given them free will. And energy never dies, it only changes form. There are expressions from you that are in forms that don't decay or experience physical changes or cycles, or what we call death and birth, and all these things that pertain to this particular physical reality scenario. But even those things can change, just slower. But what is slower in a timeless realm? Now, when you ponder that, you might start to suspect or understand or remember, perhaps, one of the reasons you're here. Some of us chose not to sit around in perfect bliss forever in the light. We chose to go into darkness and build light and cultivate light within us to light up that darkness, which is also ultimately a grand form of self-expression. Not ego self-expression. Ego is more of an illusionary, temporary construct of the human experience. That's why it should not lead your life, because it's blind. However well-meaning your ego may be, it's too limited and blind to lead you. And it's a detriment to the greater you, the greater soul, and above that, your spirit. It has existed timelessly in a realm of infinite consciousness. To put that into the tiny box of ego and let it lead is an experience for sure. When that experience has become so uncomfortable or seemingly pointless you can't stand it anymore, it's time to free yourself of it. You may in fact be ready to recognize or rediscover a higher perspective and viewpoint of what you are. Some of you may have seen it already, but we are working our way towards the simple answer: what is the meaning of life? It's something so simple. In a world where people glorify overcomplicating simple things to make themselves sound smart and meaningful, ironically, so many things in this physical realm, the way they're done, are upside down to spiritual truth. If there's a spiritual enlightenment consciousness hierarchy, that's in opposition to it, because the truth is, some of the most infinitely profound things of all are incredibly simple. Simple doesn't mean small. Simple doesn't mean little. Simple doesn't mean weak. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple just means simple. The simple fact is, if you are all, and you can bring forth from yourself anything, you do so. And what do these anythings become? Well, you let them decide. Ultimately, you are always there and open for all of them to return to home, if you will, between incarnations or other things that wouldn't even be called incarnations. There are different schools of learning and expansion and experience, in other words, that don't involve a physical life. What are all these things doing for you that you've given birth to from yourself? Even all these things in lower consciousness that are unaware of you, you are aware of them down to their cellular biology and beyond. The causal realm, the things behind the cellular biology, you are aware of everything. Everything has infinite different meanings and purposes for its very existence, where it is, when, and why. Everything. Infinite significance exists within every particle, because the micro is the same as the macro. Because the infinite source of all things is of infinite power, consciousness, and therefore meaning, the smallest division of it is also, therefore, of infinite meaning, because the micro is the same as the macro, in essence. So as these micro versions become more conscious, or less conscious, some choosing to descend further into darkness and madness and depravity, to explore that direction, away from source. Others confused, bouncing up and down in a realm of seeming duality, confused about the difference between light and dark. What is life? What is death? And there are many definitions of these things. For example, people of a certain spiritual aptitude or experience level, you might say, or awareness, look at people of a worldly nature, and even if these worldly people are smart, talented, good-looking, popular, happy, seemingly, right now they have all kinds of money, fame, success, whatever. The currently spiritually oriented person looks at them and sees death. They see that they're dead because they're spiritually dead. Because if all you have is your five senses and the things you can grab for yourself in this physical reality, look deeper. What good does it do you to be selfish and self-serving when every single one of those things you are guaranteed to lose? You are building your entire sense of yay for me out of something that will be torn away from you. So for a person with a spiritual viewpoint, of course, it looks hideous. That's living death. It doesn't mean you're stuck dead forever. It just means currently you're spiritually dead. You have no awareness of your own soul or spirit or any higher purpose or consciousness beyond things within the five senses. Let's analyze that for a second. If you're stuck in worldly five senses consciousness, and right now that's working out for you, let's look a little deeper at some implications here. That means that your experience of what is good exists within what? Your brain, your nervous system, those material possessions, those harems and pleasures, those riches and, Lear jets and whatever gets you a dopamine spike. Seemingly right now that's all well and good, right? But it takes so little to destroy your brain chemistry and put you in pure torture. If everything you have is based on something that vulnerable, it requires complete cognitive dissonance to not become overwhelmed with insanity by the base underlying truth that you are aware of and you're not looking at. That this is completely mortal, vulnerable, and it is going to be destroyed. Everything you've built your sense of what it is to be happy or successful or important or better than others or whatever it is, your definition of what life is about for you in a material sense. See, a more illuminated spiritual perspective is not judging you for this. It's actually looking at you with empathy and compassion. But it's allowing you to have that experience. You're sometimes told the truth, that to love your life in this world, to love worldly things, if that is your life, you will lose it. To seek first the kingdom of heaven and cultivate it within is an eternal value and an eternal gain. But if you leave this life deprived of that, you enter a space reflective of your own spiritual poverty. And even if you find yourself in a sea of other souls currently in a non-time scenario where they're experiencing something similar, you'll be profoundly alone because each one is caught in their own torment, and tormenting each other in some cases. And no, you're not stuck there forever, thrown away by some sadistic, narcissistic psycho that's all powerful. That's just another absolutely disgusting worldview philosophy. And there are many of them. This is why I talk about root philosophy of life. The world doesn't give out healthy root philosophies of life. It simply doesn't. Not in its current state. There's a lot of beauty in this world, especially the natural world, but there's a lot of metaphorical darkness here too. And that has a gravity to it. And when you're in the physical, that gravity is pulling on you. It's pulling on your brain chemistry. It's pulling on your physical chemistry. And therefore, if your foundation of life isn't something ecstatic and wonderful spiritually, you're always being pulled down. What if you truly believed that you were an eternal part of the Infinite One, you were eternally loved, that nothing could ever truly hurt you, and that this is a great adventure in consciousness for you to grow? I suggest to you that if you believe that at your root philosophy, which people apparently find profoundly hard to do in a world like this, and I know some of the main reasons why, but if you really did believe it, you would use your life very well. What you would make of this life, and I don't mean in other people's worldly perspective. There's no saying how anybody else would interpret your experience or your life from the outside, or misinterpret it, or even mistell the story, but your experience of it would be profoundly well used. What you made of this life, because of what you make of this life, your root philosophy. So back to the meaning of life. What is happening in the human experience and other types of experiences elsewhere, but let's stick to this for now. As consciousness grows and expands and becomes more aware of that which it is part of and coming from. What is happening as your consciousness actually expands and grows? As you're maturing in consciousness, or the kingdom of heaven, or the eternal treasure within your heart, and these are all metaphors. These are all symbols for things that are non-physical and don't have form. These are things to explain what it is like. To expand consciousness, to grow the kingdom of heaven, to develop treasure in heaven, to develop eternal treasure, is to grow in consciousness into more of the wonders that the Infinite One always had, will, and is the infinite source of. And as you're developing this in your own completely unique way, in your own completely unique individuated consciousness and personality, we call it personality here in the world, a shallow sort of superficial view of it, but what's happening? You're having the prodigal child experience. You've come here, you've made a lot of mistakes and been blinded by this world, but at some point you realize you're returning home. You're headed back with a grander appreciation. And your father, in the metaphor of the prodigal child story, which could have just as easily been your mother, or both, and maybe that's the way it was originally told in Aramaic. Either which way, though, the point of it is you're coming back as more. Now, how is that? In the prodigal child story, the person made all sorts of mistakes. They squandered their inheritance. What does that mean? You were born with a divine inheritance. You're one with the Almighty. You're part of it. What happens when you get to this world? You're convinced otherwise. You slip into depravity. You slip into desperation and distraction and confusion. You make all these mistakes that are painful for you and others. When you become conscious enough that you're headed towards what you know is your father, mother, source, with joy, you're running. Because you've done all the worldly things you thought you were tempted, you thought would fill you. You found how depravedly untrue that is, and you remembered something greater. And now your appreciation for that greater thing has been multiplied because you've been through something here that many spirits and sparks of consciousness have never incarnated to experience. I've had out-of-body experiences where I actually spoke to beings like that, and I asked them things, key things about my own life. They gave me advice that was wise, but they also told me, in some cases, they admitted to me that they had never incarnated in a place like this, so it's really more important for me to decide the value and the meaning of the experiences and what to do about it, which was shocking, because when you're talking to something on a higher plane of consciousness, In your conditioned earth life, you always expect that, it's up there on a pedestal and I'm so foolish in comparison. But just because something has access to higher truth freely and easily that you usually don't, does not actually mean it's more developed than you. Even though you're down here in a stupor, in limited consciousness, struggling with it, if used well, because your root philosophy of life allows you to do so and generates that possibility, you have become so much more of a companion, of a relationship with the Ultimate One. Now the Ultimate One's, the Infinite One, the Great Wondrous One's relationship with itself is becoming more and more enhanced through you. So if you do your best to put yourself in the infinitely oversized shoes you can't fill, and look at the sequence of things from that perspective, even if you can only see a little bit of the picture, that's where I derive my meaning of life from. I don't derive it from my personal view. I'm looking at it from the source, which somehow I've been privileged to be able to catch a glimpse of. Probably through great deals of agony and suffering, honestly. It was like a kindness done for me. I had a lot of out-of-body experiences due to suffering. Some of it was physical suffering, but most of the time it was severe emotional suffering. It was so bad, it was like spontaneous death over and over, but the body wasn't quite dead. So I had to keep coming back, which is good. There's a purpose in this. But in those experiences, once I was disconnected from this body and its nervous system and all the damage done in it from destructive root philosophies in this world, all of a sudden I was free and I was allowed to interact with higher consciousness and actually perceive and feel it and be given gifts. Gifts that I sometimes don't know what to do with when back in this situation, the human experience. So part of my personal philosophy of life, which is not what I'm sharing, because why would I do that to you? But part of my personal philosophy of life is, or what I make of it, is that in a world starved for spiritual food and water, for lack of better terms, whether people realize that or not, and these are just words, but people are starved and thirsty for these things. I must share, not because I'm obligated, but just because it's in my nature, just because I'm free to do so. I don't owe anybody anything. I'm free to do so. And as an expression of something infinitely unfathomable that can't ever be defined, can't, because, definitions are for particles that are in division. How could a particle define an infinite universe? It can't. And I'm not talking about the universe. Some people talk to the universe. They think it's their God. And the universe is just one layer of creativity, of something far beyond that, which is not fully imaginable by anyone. But having been given a few glimpses from a higher vantage point outside the limits of the human brain and body, my testimonial to you is that the meaning of life, and within this you can find many other great meanings too, but the meaning of life is that the infinite, great all that is experiencing more and more of itself through you and countless other expressions. And again, these expressions are at all different levels of consciousness. A lizard over here running on a tree doesn't know that God or, the Great Spirit or the Force or the Source or whatever you prefer is experiencing that through the lizard. The lizard isn't aware. The lizard doesn't hold enough awareness. Yet it's true. The lizard is a part of the one experiencing itself through different perspectives. If one big lizard eats the other lizard, the one is experienced doing the eating and being eaten through things that have their own free will. in whatever limited form they do, based on their level of consciousness. And through simple observation, you can see that an organism with more consciousness can wield more free will, which should be a pretty big red flag for the philosophies passed around in this world that say you don't even have free will. If you want to lose consciousness and become further enchained in darkness, a philosophy like that will help you do so. And it is possible that that's what some actually want, for whatever reason. Very well then, explore it. Explore the futility of darkness until you've had enough. And if you can repent and turn the other way and come back from that, all that futility could actually be made into great value. Even if you're some nasty entity hiding in the dark, tormenting and deceiving humanity, hating the creator that you can't really comprehend, the creator's still experiencing itself even through you, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry if that makes a bunch of things in hell angry, but it's true. There is nothing outside of the great consciousness, but you do have free will. A rock has very little free will. It doesn't make decisions, but it has moving particles of energy holding its form together, so it is alive in some sense. These organized levels of consciousness are very interesting to look at. Again, if you use reason, say you look at the lizard again and see that the lizard makes certain decisions. Should I try to eat that wasp? Should I run from the bigger lizard? Should I fight it for territory? And one lizard will run and live to fight another day. And I've watched some of these lizards futilely attack the bigger lizard and just get eaten. And that was his choice. Now, you and I, as humans, were given a lot more free will. But the variability between humans and levels of consciousness all across what we call time has been such an absolutely huge spread, a huge chasm of difference. One person's experience, one person's awareness is so vastly different from another's in many cases. The people really are experiencing a completely different reality, even in the same world. And yet the greatness, the great infinite mass of wonders that is the all, is experiencing all of it. The pain, the joy, the stupidity. But from a perspective where there's no harm in any of it. Fully understanding painful emotions, fully empathizing, but being harmed by none of it. And again, the limits of the human imagination can only go so far with that. But it helps to try. It helps to try. It's good for you. It's healthy. Unless it's not. Unless your current root philosophy of life is tearing at you so badly right now, it feels like evil spirits are clawing your back to try to stop you from even hearing any of this. In which case, the current subconscious programming philosophy of life you're carrying is so destructive that it will tear your nervous system apart if you don't do something about it. Or you can go through your life like many do, instinctively, sort of subconsciously, just doing their best to ignore it, even though it's a haunting feeling following them everywhere. And a lot of the activity and achievement and things people become interested in life are actually a way of running from that. And that's not all bad because those experiences are valid as well. Humans sometimes make great discoveries when they're busy running from another thing. And something unexpected has occurred and they fall into a precipice and discover something that nobody saw before. These things happen. There's always a higher design. And like I said, even the smallest thing, every particle, every non-particle has infinite different purposes for why it even exists. Infinite. Because again, the micro is the same as the macro. How do I know this? It's just been given to me. I can't prove it to your left educated human limited brain. But philosophy, only goes so far for that part of you anyway. And then it just hits a brick wall and it can't go any further. And it looks for all these solutions or methods or ponderings, but you will get no further than that brick wall if you don't access, say, your heart center, which is another metaphor. Your female side. which is another metaphor, largely absent from humanity, where the magic is, where the intuition is, where the knowing is, where a lot of the divine birthrights that humans are given but easily lose because of the conditions on this planet reside. So there's the ultimate great meaning of life, and then there's what is the next bigger, better step, the next bigger, better platform that your personal philosophy of life is ready to step up to? How much of the infinite wondrous, infinite one that is all are you willing to experience and ready to experience? And that experience is completely undefinable. You don't get to control it, label it, put it in a tiny box, because if you do, you're not having that experience. You've come up with a counterfeit. You've made something synthetic, which is so very easy to do and so tempting and so prominent in this world. People who are lost inside and need to feel like an authority over others can only do so if they can keep the others at their own level or even lower in consciousness. They need you afraid. They need you miserable. They need you feeling like not enough. They need you hating someone, yourself or someone else, or all the above. They just need to keep that low consciousness so you feel like you need them, like they really are an authority, something to look up to, something to believe in, something that's figuring it all out, something that has it under control. When humans don't actually control this at all, they influence it. Your consciousness influences everything, including material reality. But most people on the planet currently have so little sovereignty over their own consciousness that it's largely being used by programming by those who control all the narratives and systems and institutions and have for thousands and thousands of years, and have passed on this hidden occult knowledge through nasty rituals to make sure it stays in their family line as if they're achieving something, trying to futilely fight against a creator they don't understand or perceive anymore. And yet they're fully, completely perceived by that creator, even from within. They're just completely devoid of awareness of it and vainly fighting against it. And there are those who have become conscious of this infinite living one, this infinite wondrousness within them and within all things, and interact with it internally and no longer need external cues or processes or homework or do this or don't do that, because it's a direct connection that they've become aware of. This is the discovery of the kingdom of heaven within. This is the greatest treasure attainable from within this realm of low consciousness. And it's literally limitless in how much it can grow and expand and create further. Because that's the essence of what you are. Because the micro is actually a reflection of the macro. And you and I and that lizard over there and this leaf and even this chair, even inanimate matter, it's not spiritually conscious of anything. It's actually all spiritual. Physical matter is held together by spirit, by consciousness, by choice, by focus, by intention, by the infinite wondrous one that is experiencing this through you, even experiencing what this chair experiences, everything. In an infinitely capacitated form that doesn't even require time, and simultaneously experiences all times, timelines, possibilities, everything. There are versions of you in what you'd call the future. There are versions of you in what you'd call other dimensions. There are countless different variations and ripples of the same creative thought, which is you, all known intimately by the one. How many people in this world crave intimacy? They're aware they want it, but they don't know how to go about it. and they try to force it or grasp it or seize it in some other person, and they push them away in their desperation, or they're too scared to even try. And yet the ultimate intimacy is already being experienced within you. When is that relationship not going to be one-sided? That's for you. That's how that's decided. You decide. When you're ready, that relationship becomes two-sided. You start to experience some of the empathy from your individuated perspective within the infinite, instead of only the infinite experiencing it through you. So you can't actually fail God, people, because God doesn't fail itself. No matter what poor decisions or pain and havoc your life may cause, there's a richness in it for the ultimate one. When the ultimate one sends a messenger into this world to share with you spiritual principles, so that if you don't want to suffer and cause suffering, and you would like to bring light, and you would like to experience more wondrous joy, power, freedom from a spiritual and true perspective, an eternal reality, that is for your good. That is to relieve suffering. That is to give those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the heart that is ready the opportunity to more rapidly expand and grow into it. It's not because some petty person in the sky is all upset by your behavior. That is beyond absurd and ridiculous. And a philosophy of life like that will make you deeply ill deep inside. Your nervous system has been largely damaged. The way your brain and nerves have formed, you're not a lot of good to yourself and others, and you're full of triggers and damage, basically. And you ask yourself, why do I do that which I do not wish to do? It must be the corrupt flesh. There's no stopping it. Untrue. That's just a person in philosophical darkness trying to ponder what they don't understand about themselves. Philosophical, better yet, spiritual darkness. People find a lot of lowly philosophies relatable and blindly assume that if it's relatable, it must be true, and then they just spiral further into it. And they wonder why they suffer. And they wonder what they're really looking for. Where is that wellspring? Where is that well that when you drink from it, you never become thirsty again? The one Yeshua was referring to. If you drink from these waters, you will never thirst again. Where's that? You're not going to find it looking around for it somewhere on the planet outside of yourself or in outer space. I mean, you could, but you can just as well find it right here or right there, wherever you are right now. Because space and time and distance are non-issues for the spirit of the infinite living one. They're not what they are for us. Those aren't any kind of limits. So when that inner alchemy of relationship becomes two-sided, you discover that, of course, what you were looking for was already there. The reason you're looking is because you've had the lights dimmed, so you can't see what's there. Why would you do that? Why would you enter a realm where your lights are dimmed, where you suffer in ignorance spiritually? Well, why would someone who wants to bench press 700 pounds put weight on themselves that they can't really lift and resist it as hard as they could until it crushes them? Because the only way you're going to get there is by stretching your capacity and going beyond where you're currently at. If you want to grow faster, it takes greater pressure. This realm is a realm of great spiritual pressure. That means that every person on this planet, no matter how despicable they may seem to be at this point, was a profoundly brave beam of light, and that's why they arrived here to begin with. And never sign anybody off. Never believe in your heart that God's going to throw somebody away into some hell and just leave them there forever. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And this means in your heart as well. If you're assigning people to eternal damnation because you're judging them, all you're doing is choosing to have an experience to wake you up the hard way when you leave this world, the brutal way. Because what you've done to another, you've done to yourself, even if you've only done it internally. Most people are too afraid to act on their negative notions towards others externally because there's legal consequences. Or somebody around you might not put up with your crap and they might put you in your place, but they do all kinds of nasty things to people in their mind or heart, right? Well, what's the problem with that? Like Yeshua said, even if you look at a woman and lust at her internally, you've already committed adultery. This is now between you and God. This is between you and God. Not that there can really be something between you and God, but you can go to a hideous, dark place where you swear there is no God and stay there for seemingly an eternity. That can be your experience because of what you've now put between you and God. What you've done that you would not have done unto you, what you're holding on to that is untrue. What you were holding on to that is unrighteous, untruth, not of the light, not of the truth, not of how creation is held together, not of the actual nature of what you are. When you cling to what is not your truth, even if you call it your truth, it simply won't work. It's dysfunctional. Dysfunctional spirituality takes you to a very dark place with all kinds of pain and suffering. And it's your choice, whether you know it or not. And you'll always have the chance to figure that out. But if you look around, you realize that some people sort of calcify and cling to negative things they shouldn't. And it makes them very spiritually ignorant. If you can see that happening in this reality, just understand that it happens in non-physical reality as well. Give care, give light to your internal philosophy of life then, my friends. If the God you believe in currently is not really worthy of trusting, of relying on for all things, and for seeking and for loving with all your heart, mind, and soul, if you have an idol God that you hold on to, how are you supposed to truly love something like that with all your heart, mind, and soul if it's hideous? And it's depicted in the worst nature of human beings, infallible and flawed. You can't. You're trying to live a lie and you can't do it. Dysfunctional spiritual philosophies of life create a dysfunctional spiritual environment. You can see evidence of it in the physical world, and when you live the physical world, you'll see the exact evidence of what it currently is that you're holding within you. Because now you'll be holding yourself within it. It'll flip around. It'll envelop you. Tend to your philosophy of life. What is your current inner kingdom? The lasting thing that you're going to take with you. What's in there currently? Is it depravity and gnashing of teeth and hatred and pettiness and ugly and this and that? Because unless you want to enter that and have the visceral terror of that experience traumatize you to give you a chance to wake up, you do have the power to start tending to it now. You have that power. It's your divine birthright. Use it wisely. But keep in mind, you cannot fail God because God doesn't fail anything. The Creator didn't give infinite individuations of itself as an experiment. When you exist without the limits of time, without any lack of consciousness or knowing or power, you don't do things that are mistakes. You do things that have infinite meaning and purpose. And that's you. You, whoever you are right now, whether you know this or not, you are a micro version of the infinite macro. And you have infinite meaning and purpose, and you will never not exist. And your home is in that infinite wonder that you've come from. And yet you will get to maintain your individuation and develop it as you will, and as you can, and as you choose. It is your divine birthright to grow in consciousness eternally. Because in doing so, the source of all things, again, gets to experience more and more different perspectives and experiences of itself through itself in infinite, countless different forms and variations. By giving you free will, as you become more conscious and use it more creatively, you're bringing joy to the heart of the Infinite One, for lack of better words, because you are the experience it's having. So if you don't like, hatred and backstabbing and undermining and fear mongering and manipulation and all those nasty, horrible things that feel awful, remember, whatever you're gifting yourself and others is what you're currently gifting the Creator. It's not that the Creator can't take it, but the part of the Creator that's you or someone else is being hurt. And if you make a decision, I'd rather move into higher frequency of light and consciousness and freedom and spiritual ecstasy and truth and vitality on all levels and greater awareness and contain more wonder within me that I get to experience. You need to move further into the light, not the darkness. This world, this current human world that pretends politics and intellectualism and war and all this nonsense is ever going to fix anything, it's the perfect playground for your soul to make this choice. To finally become clear instead of dabbling back and forth, up and down into light and dark. Which direction am I moving? Am I ready to embody more of the infinite wondrous one? Or do I still want to experience more of a lack thereof and suffer the spiritual illness, the emotional illness, the mental illness, and the depravity, and see what my own twisted, broken, dysfunctional version of spirituality can create for me to experience in others? It's a choice, but it's an unconscious choice for most until they're conscious enough to make it consciously. Once you pass a certain threshold, these things become conscious choice. And there are beings in this world who have very much consciously chosen the dark path. They're the ones pulling the strings, if you will, and have been for a very long time. Because the ability to abuse and use you like a commodity is the best they can do. That's the best thing they're going to have, and it's only going to get worse from there. And however stubbornly strong their ignorance, spiritual, and their futile fight against that which is going to take them further down that path till you literally cannot descend any further. You literally cannot go any further into all that is nasty. There's a ceiling, or should I say a floor, to that they'll finally hit. And they can spend an eternity there in futility, however long, however many eternities it takes them to finally repent of it and to start heading home. It's just a hard path back to the same place. And outside of this realm where time doesn't exist, you can expend what we would call eternities. Stuck. You could float in a dark void because you just wanted silence. You could do that for an eternity. Nothing you choose is a threat to the infinite. Everything you choose has value to the infinite. It can cause you and others in a finite form suffering or joy or bliss or growth or shrinkage or gain or loss. None of it's actually a problem to the real God, to the real Creator. It's when you decide that you're done with suffering depravity and you choose a direction, you get to move more into the light, experience more consciousness. But nobody can choose that for you, and there's no external behavior, ritual that makes it happen. It's when your soul matures into it that it happens. That's why you can share spiritual truth with people in any time, version, iteration of society that come and go on this planet. And only those in that present area, time, space that have the current ears to hear and eyes to see will be able to use it well. For the rest, it'll work more like a testament against them, because here was the truth. Here was all that is good, and you didn't want it, and you weren't ready for it. Which isn't you being judged. It's just cause and effect, and it is what it is. You missed it because you weren't ready. There's more darkness ahead for you, and that's okay. So there it is, the meaning of life, put into human words, which is kind of like trying to It's like trying to put an ocean in a thimble, of course. But again, the micro is the same as the macro on some level. It's just much less and less aware. It's all there. It's all within you. But until your consciousness is able to illuminate it with more light, you cannot see, feel, experience. You do not yet have the eyes to hear, the eyes to hear, the eyes to see, the ears to hear, until you do. And you will when you're actually ready. That's when. So in the illusion of time, if these words and energies here are stirring you that way, if there's recognition, then to whatever degree you are ready for that, and you'll do with it what you will. Bear good fruit unto life abundantly in what creative form comes to you as an individual to do so. And as for human experience, people have often been confused looking for moral guidelines. Take the ultimate simplification of all the things that man complicates to confuse and abuse you, and take the ultimate simplified, childlike, true version of it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because that's the best way you'll be able to live a human life. Morally, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you can't currently love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, it's because the root philosophy of life you're carrying will not allow you to do so. So as a friend and maybe a signpost in your experience, if you receive me that way, I encourage you to use your divine power and your birthright to look deeply and uncover the root philosophy of life that's been given to you. It isn't really yours. If it's in any way limiting you from becoming an ever-expanding vessel of the consciousness, of the life force, of the creativity, of the divinity of the One, then it's not really yours. It's just something you picked up in this world to suffer with until you've had enough of it. There are people that are more comfortable in chains currently. There are people that are more comfortable in their current prison cell, and they will fight you if you try to open the door for them. Very well. It's for those with the eyes to hear and the ears to see. The eyes to see and the ears to hear. Wow. Apparently that's enough words for me for right now. I love you all. Any feedback here is accepted and appreciated. I trust completely that this is in the best interest of all involved, except for those who would choose otherwise, and that's their freedom with their free will, which will also be honored. Much love. Over and out.